Welcome back, my little killers. This is episode 2 of A Killer Within, a true crime podcast. Today is my second episode of my first very podcast, and I can honestly say using Buzzsprout, it's made everything so simple. They upload your podcast to every single major platform there is. And if you use the code in the bottom of the summary of this podcast, you can get a $20 Amazon Visa card when you first sign up with your first paid subscription. So if you're interested in doing some podcasts, look up buzzsprout.com. Today we have a very incredible guest again. She co-hosted with me the very first premiere of The Killer Within last week. Welcome back, Hunter.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be back.
I know, it was so fun. Our very first true crime podcast did incredible, you guys. We are featured in 3 different countries: Costa Rica, Canada, and Sweden. So, yes, it is official. Our podcast has went international.
That's insane. I still cannot believe that.
I know, I'm so excited. And today, I just had to dive in with something just a little bit more creepier than the first one we had last week. And
Oh, I'm excited.
I know, let's get going. So, today we are going to be talking about the Little Pudding River Killer. Yeah, it's a really weird name, but it's a river in Salem, Oregon. This is where the killer liked to throw his little lifeless bodies out. So, this killer, it took place in 1982. And Hunter, why I'm telling you about this, I want you to think about this and how big this man was. At 24 years old, he was 6 feet and 300 pounds.
Oh my gosh, that is a pretty big size for a guy.
That's
Really, for anybody.
Do you realize, like, me being 5'5", I would be like, "Hi, how are you?" Like, he could like just
How's the weather up there?
he'll just blow me down. He's so big. But
Yeah.
the reason I want you to know how big he was, because throughout this podcast episode, I want you to imagine these small women and how they're facing this giant. Like, he's a giant. So I want you to realize how big this guy was, and just picture these small women just fighting him. Like, I can't begin to I couldn't imagine at all. But as we know, our very first poor little victim, her name was Sherry Early. She was 18 years old. Hunter, she was 5 foot even and 100 pounds.
Oh my gosh, that's like less than half of him.
Like, she had these beautiful blue eyes. Everyone knew her about her eyes. She just had those dashing, like, crystal clear blue eyes. And she was a little bright woman, being a delivery driver for Domino's. And what's weird about it is her parents were very sketched out about her working at Domino's. Now, this is in 1982. Frankly, they don't have cell phones, so, we can't really keep in touch like we can now. But, so I could understand a little bit of worryingness with her being so young. She was only 18 years old. And
Yeah.
what's sad is she wasn't even supposed to be working this night.
Oh my gosh, the night that it happened.
The night that it happened, on July 4th.
Oh.
She went in to cover a shift and never came home from that shift.
Oh my gosh.
So about this, it's so sad. Sherry, She obviously was such a small girl, but they weren't supposed to kidnap Sherry. This murder was planned between two men, Roger and William. And they called Domino's and asked for the girl in the orange Volkswagen. Give it to be the girl in the orange Volkswagen was the girls that Sherry was covering for.
Oh my gosh.
The plan originally was to kidnap the girl that in the orange Volkswagen and hold her ransom for money.
And it ended up being Sherry.
This is a thing. It never got to that point. Because when they called and they asked for the girl in the Volkswagen, they just continued to through the order. And the thing is, back then, Domino's, since they didn't have caller ID and everything, they were made to call, like when say you ordered, they would call you back to see if it was a real order. You get what I'm saying? And they didn't do it this time. So when Sherry got to the location, she seen two men flag her down. She got out with the pizza boxes. They kidnapped her. And William goes, Roger, we got the wrong girl. So they pulled over by the Little Pudding River. And they wrapped their hands around her little neck and strangled her.
Oh my gosh.
And they threw her body in the river. That was the first one. Well, it is be known that at 10:13, the neighbor spotted her car that was left there. And they called the police, and another neighbor also called the police. So when the cops got there, they seen the pizza boxes scattered. And the next morning, they started like a search. They didn't find nothing. They just found a hat 50 feet from the car. And the
Was
Domino's
it a
hat.
hat from her? Or?
Yeah, the Domino's
okay.
hat, her part of her uniform. And the next day, you know, the volunteers from the community, because, you know, back then, like, Salem, Oregon was only a city of 80,000 people, if that. So that's small for a major city, the capital of a state. Like, that's small. And they started putting things out, and like she had a tattoo of the letters T and B. And they figured that they were looking for a 1974 Monte Carlo or a 1950s to 1960s lime green truck. And the reason they know it, because neighbors spotted these cars there previously. Well, the next day, Roger called Domino's and asked for a $50,000 ransom.
Oh my
her.
gosh.
Yeah, $50,000. But the thing is, he never called back and asked for Domino's. And you know what's you know earlier how I said that back then Domino's was required to, you know, hang up and call the number back.
Yeah, to make sure it was in order.
If they did that, they would have realized the number was from earlier. And the manager, the general manager, admitted that they only do that 5 to 10% of the time.
Wow.
Yeah. So the second day, well, 3 days later, the family hired a private investigator, and they put out a reward for her. Anyone that knew anything about the case, anyone that knew the criminals that did this disgusting crime. And at first it was only $23,000. 3 weeks later, they increased it to $30,000. So this is what's weird, Hunter. They were lost. They didn't have a suspect. They didn't have a body. They just had pizza boxes and her hat in her car. Well, 7 weeks later, another girl went missing. And they had one person in common, and that was a guy named Daryl Wilson. He was interviewed and he had an alibi. But the thing is, he left the camp that he was supposedly at for 9 hours.
So it makes you wonder, what was he doing in those 9 hours?
Yes. And a sidekick talked to Daryl, and he is an owner of a lime green pickup truck.
Hmm.
And the next day, he went and got the truck painted brown.
Oh, that's not suspicious.
At all. But thank God a witness nearby gave like a partial plate. And 3:30 that day, Daryl hung himself. And then that's when Sherry Elmer's case went cold.
Oh, wow.
Yes. That's sad, isn't it?
Poor girl.
And it's not over. That happened in 1982. 2 years later, Rebecca Darling went missing. She was 21, again, 5 feet tall, 5'10". She had long brown hair, and she wore white overalls and worked at a Circle K. February
She
21st,
went missing from the same area?
yeah, February 21st, 1984, around 3:20 to 3:50, William walked in that store, carried her from the store. 3:50, a customer called in, and the place was empty. There was no one working there, so she called 911. 911 came out, and they found her purse and her car keys and her coat, and her car was still there, but no Rebecca Darling.
Oh, wow.
William, this is sad. William drove her to his house, tied her up, sexually assaulted her, tied her hands up, and wrapped a rope around her neck 3 times and strangled her.
Oh my gosh.
He took her body, drove her to the Little Pudding River, and threw her body in. That was February 21st. March 25th, a month and 3 days later, a farmer found her body decomposed in the bank of the river.
Poor girl.
And it's not over yet, Hunter. This guy is disgusting, man. 1 month later, not even 1 month, almost 10 days later, Catherine Redmond, an 18-year-old, she was a freshman at the Willamette University. You know where Aquaman is at the center of downtown Salem?
Yeah.
That college is just right there. She went right there. She was 5'6", tiny little thing, and she was going to a campus party. And what's boggled my mind is all these women were blonde haired, and they were all wearing white. Catherine was wearing white pants. Like, so I'm like, in my head, I'm like, is this reminding him of someone?
Yeah, there's a pattern.
There's a pattern here. And the way he's murdering them, it's all the same. So I feel like he's a sexual sadist. Like, he's cruel. He's a sexual monster.
Yeah, he definitely is.
Now, she was driving home at 2 a.m. and William bumped her car, like just rear-ended her. He took her, sexually assaulted her, and later that day, they found just her car on the side of the road. Her door was open. A single shoe was found by her car, just a single shoe. A box from the Circle K. Isn't that weird? Wasn't his
It's
last.
really weird.
And a dent in her rear bumper. And they found a receipt that she went to Circle K at 2:30. Well, Hunter, this is where everything, this man's life just, he's getting away with this. Ooh. Witness found a station wagon in a ditch, okay? Well, no one really thought about that, okay? Like, it's just a station wagon on the side of the road. Well, 3 days later, a female randomly called 911 and said a large, heavy-set man in a station wagon bumped her in the back of her car and asked her to get out of the car, and she just kept going. So the cops were like, this is weird. The last 2 bodies that we found all had bumps in their car. Like, what is going on? So they remember, oh, there was a station wagon that had a bump on the side of the road that had a bump on his car. Let me call the tow company. So that's what the police did. They called the tow company. And the tow company was like, yeah, we picked him up. But he paid with a check. And that check was William. And guess what was found by his car?
What?
Katie's other shoe.
Oh my gosh.
So that day, they just, put surveillance on William. They were like, this, something's going on. But they just didn't have enough, little to put him up. But they noticed that he had scratch and bite marks on his hand and everything. And later that evening on 4/3, later that evening, Katie's body was found. Her body was
They found
naked.
her body.
Yes, they did find her body. Her body was naked, face down, with her clothes 20 feet away.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. On April 3rd, William was arrested for this. What? He was arrested for making harassing and obscene phone calls to a 20-year-old. Not the murders. He was arrested for something completely different.
Well, did he ever get caught for the murders?
That's what's coming up. He pled guilty for, harassing the girl on the phone call. But later that evening, his girlfriend, his father, and mother came in to visit him in jail. And he admitted to killing Katie.
Mm.
And the father was like, you need to confess to this. So William called everyone in, and he said he would agree to confess on the murder of Katie if he didn't get charged for a robbery that he confessed to in Washington.
So he was trying to make a deal.
Yeah. And then later on, he confessed for killing Rebecca. So What? You get arrested for making sexual and obscene phone calls to a 20-year-old and then winds up coming guilty about 2 murders that he did, only if he didn't get charged for a robbery that he did in the next state over.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah, that's crazy.
So a psychologist later on said that William is a sexually sadistic serial killer.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Now, on July 9th, he was sentenced to 2 lives and and a mandatory 40-year sentence before he can file for parole. Okay? But it's not over there yet. He's went to jail. That was 1984. Well, 2004 comes along, and Oregon sets up this cold case squad made of 4 retired members from the FBI, the sheriff's office, and all that. And they took a look at his first murder. Remember Sherry, the the Domino's girl?
Yes.
Okay, well, back then when they asked William about this, he said he was on a long haul drive because he was a truck driver that was
Mm-hmm.
living with his parents. Like, what? Okay. But
Yeah.
they seen that he was pulled over in Silverton the day Sherry went missing. How is that possible? You remember where I live? You remember where we went for my premiere party at Miss Judy's
Yes.
house? That's Silverton.
Okay.
So he confessed about him and Roger killing Sherry, but Roger didn't get penalized because he died in 2003. So 3 years later, he was convicted to killing Sherry as well, and he had another life sentence. So that was 3 life sentences that he got. It's not over there yet.
Mm.
That was 2007. He got convicted for the 3rd. Well, in 2012, the cold case squad that Oregon did, they revisited a case of Terry Monroe. She went missing in 1981. That was a year before Sherry was murdered. And she was 21. And he talked about her killing her in prison. So in October of 2012, he got another life sentence for killing another woman. So a total of 4 life sentences. That 4 people he killed within 3 years. Brutally, sadistically.
Oh.
What do you have to say about this one?
It just makes me wonder, is that was there any more girls? Are those girls the only ones that he got to?
Well,
Were there more murders?
he was 24 when he got convicted. When he was 18, he was convicted of sexual assault at 18 years old, but the court acquitted it, threw it out. So that lets me know that Mr. William Scott Smith was doing this way before Sherry. I mean, Sherry was his first one, and they never felt, so he did something right. So I believe there probably are more women, because I remember reading that there was 7 other cases that were still cold that resembled this same crime, that had the same patterns of the sexually assault, the bodies laying naked, the body being decomposed in rivers and all that. Those were 7 cold cases that still haven't been reopened or investigated as of now. It's sad. But
It is really sad.
that is going to be it for episode 2. I do want to thank you for coming on the show. And all right, Hunter, I do want to say thank you. And I hope to see you again as a guest on my podcast. We love having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope to be back soon.
Most definitely, you guys. I will talk to you later. Stay tuned for next week for another episode. Goodbye, you guys.